Welcome to the Sheraton Hotel, where I am spending quarantine in complete isolation, and I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to talk to you about depression, and more specifically, my depression. I considered doing the video in the bathtub, but as of like 3 days ago, I decided I hate baths, and this was my opportunity to love a bath. I do not love a bath. In fact, I would trade my bath today for one single breath of fresh air. But anyway, here we are. I'm in the bathroom and I wanted to talk about mental illness, but more specifically depression, because I feel like a lot of people must have been going through some sort of depression or mental health issue due to quarantine, or more so just the state of the world, that it just seems to be crumbling to the ground. And I commend anyone who is feeling great during this time. But anyway, I wanted to talk about first my depression, or what depression feels like to me. Second, depression and relationships, depression on social media, and then ways that I have been able to cope with my depression. How many times can I say depression in this video? It's probably gonna be a million. So let's get started. I have chronic depression and I was diagnosed at the tender age of 18, but I do suspect that I have had depression way before I was diagnosed. Even from reading my old journals, there was something in me that just felt such deep heaviness and sadness for such a young age. But anyway, I was diagnosed when I was 18 and I was given medication, and I remember that really did help me. I think that year of my life at 18, that was the worst depression that I've ever experienced to date. It just seemed like it took over such a big chunk of time and of life. I couldn't get out of bed. I was just crying uncontrollably, and I think I binge watched every season of Community like 3 times. And I guess for anyone who hasn't experienced depression, for me at least, it isn't sadness. Sadness is very different to being depressed. Depressed is just complete indifference to the world. You're in bed, you wake up, and you do not want to get out of bed. The smallest of things take so much energy and just feel impossible. And I think the difference for me is that sadness is something that, it sounds a little bit twisted, but I think it's very true, that sadness is an emotion that to some extent you get to enjoy. You can watch a sad movie and find solace in that. You can listen to a sad song or an album and kind of sing and cry to that. But when you're depressed, at least when you're like in the thick of it, there is no joy in anything. And sadness as well, to a certain extent, it seems like you can still live your life and do things whilst you're sad. You might take a day off or 2 days off, but then on the 3rd day you can still feel sad and go out, and you can still feel sad and, I don't know, write about it and edit a video. Depression, it just feels like you can't do anything. I have been off medication for many years now. I have on occasion kind of considered taking medication again, but I kind of find myself getting out of that bout at some point, so I never go back to taking medication. But I've always been open to taking it again, because I know that for a lot of people it can just be that push that they need to get back into life and to get back a little bit of joy. And to have your life on pause can be really hard, especially during a time in the world where it seems like life is just so focused on productivity and how you're going to start your next business and how you're going to start your side hustle, and how many hours of the day can you spend working and taking care of yourself. anytime anyone talks to me about depression or is looking for advice, I always tell them to go seek therapy, talk to someone, and discuss your options. But also be very informed of what you are deciding to take, because you should be informed. You should be able to say a confident yes when you are taking medication. Or at least as the most confident as you can be, because it can be very complicated. I think one of the hardest parts for me dealing with depression is kind of the repercussions of coming out of a bout of depression, and that usually means kind of doing my rounds of I'm sorry to many different people. Definitely puts a strain in most, if not every, relationship, and it is something that I have had to dealt with constantly. And I think more so now as an adult living in a different country, in which I'm, I think, more deliberate and more conscious of the relationships that I'm making. They're not as circumstantial as kind of like growing up with your friends from school. I now tend to attract people that kind of manage friendships and relationships the same way that I do. And that is in the way that I give my friends space when I know that they're going through something, and they do the same for me. And I think that means that most of my friends have experienced either depression or anxiety or some sort of mental illness themselves, or they've had friends or family members that have experienced some sort of mental illness. But it is really hard coming to terms with losing friends because of your depression, or having to explain how impossible it seems in the moment to send a very simple text telling someone that right now I don't feel like talking, but I'll be available very soon. I'll keep you posted. In like every time I look back at kind of like an episode of depression, I think, okay, next time I'll learn to send a collective text so that my friends know that it's not personal. But in the moment, it feels very ridiculous to say, and it's something that I've had to kind of work through, is that the simplest things feel absolutely impossible. It's like there is no energy for it. And if you've never experienced depression, it might seem very foreign, and it might even seem like an excuse, and I completely understand that. And that's why I am very understanding of people that kind of have to step away from my friendship, because I do understand what it must feel like to kind of be left on red for a very long time. I think what has brought me the most peace is my best friend, my really best friend, Dane, who has kind of cemented this idea that ultimately you have to be so content and so at peace with your own company and with your own solitude that anyone who decides to leave and to maybe stop a relationship to you, you can very comfortably let them go, because you know that ultimately you'll be okay on your own. And of course, we cannot survive on our own. We are social creatures, but creating relationships from that landscape, from knowing that you are enough, making friendships from that landscape is very different, and it feels a lot more intentional than making friends that you like but probably don't really know how to deal with you and your bouts of depression. And I guess also understanding that it is completely valid that someone might not feel satisfied with what I'm offering has kind of liberated me a little bit, because I think doing the I'm sorry rounds, and I'm sorry I didn't answer your text, and I'm sorry I'm depressed, there is just so much guilt and so much shame attached to that. And that is considering that depression is one of those mental illnesses, depression and anxiety, that are the most discussed. still stigmatized and still taboo, but still the ones that are discussed the most. And I can't even begin to comprehend what it must feel like to have bipolar disorder or OCD and try to explain that to someone who has no idea what you're talking about. So I send you all my love to anyone who has dealt with mental illness and has felt completely alone and has felt confused and hasn't had the language to express what it feels like, or even has had the language but someone couldn't understand what they meant. I know how hard that can be to lose people to something that you feel you have no control over. When I think about what I do for a living, at least part-time, which is social media and making videos and being on Instagram, what is it that I do? It's so interesting to me and kind of so weird that I ended up doing this, because I guess making videos and being creative relies on you having to feel like you can be creative and to feel like you do have the energy to think new thoughts and put a camera on your face and post something on Instagram. And I know I have spoken about mental health, mental illness, depression on social media, but it's a little bit different discussing that as something that I deal with as to discussing that as something that I'm going through right now. And I think what stops me from telling people that, hey, I'm depressed right now, is just, I guess, the feedback that I get. And I know that it comes with a lot of love and care from people, and I thank you so much for worrying or for wanting to provide a little bit, I don't know, of positivity into my life. But when you're depressed and when you get comments telling you that maybe you should try and be more positive, or like your life is great, or everything will be okay, like those are things that I think are the most triggering, because these are the exact things that we tell ourselves. Well, I tell myself while I'm depressed, I'm like, why are you depressed? What is so wrong in your life that this is how you feel, that you can't even get out of bed? Kind of those comments kind of invalidate how you're feeling, and even though I know that that's not the intention, but it does invalidate what you're feeling, and this obsession with toxic positivity kind of again invalidates something that feels really true for me in that moment, and it might not be true. I mean, I wish a positive thought could change the way I was feeling, but believe me, I've tried. That's the reason why I read every self-development book. It's the reason why I did affirmations every day. I did 2 courses in a yoga teacher training. I did meditation courses. I mean, I did everything trying to find a cure for the depression and feeling unmotivated and just indifferent. And now I have more actionable ways of dealing with my depression and coping with how I'm feeling. But I did go through that state in which I was just trying to grasp for more positive thoughts and more positive affirmations, and if I think this way, my life will be this way. And it might work for some people, but I think for most of us who are dealing with chronic depression, diagnosed chronic depression, it's not as simple. It isn't. Imagining yourself being happier it doesn't happen when you're in the thick of it, when you're in like a dark void. It just seems so impossible to think of yourself being happy that, I mean, at least for me, it just didn't work. So I'm always just a little bit, I don't know, confused about what to share and what not to share when it comes to my own experience. And I guess I like to share more about depression when I'm out of it and when I've learned something from it, or when I can find something of value that would help other people. Although I do understand that when I go through social media and someone is being very candid about their mental health, I feel some sort of comfort, in which I know there are many people experiencing this. It's not just me, but it's one of those things that it just feels so isolating and lonely when you're going through it, that you kind of forget that of course you're not the only one. And having that reminder on my feed on social media has helped me, but I still haven't found a way that I can communicate that in a way that feels comfortable for me. But I just wanted to mention that because I know, at least coming from my friends, when they see me post on social media, they don't think that I'm going through anything, and they're like, oh, she's going for a run, oh, she's having, I don't know, a smoothie, she must be living it up. But in reality, a lot of the times I'm not. I'm just trying to do what's best for me, but I'm not super happy going for a run or super happy having my porridge. I'm probably depressed. Trying to inspire you to make better choices, but ultimately depressed. And that's what we don't see on social media. So ways that I've kind of learned to cope with my depression throughout the years are kind of more actionable ways. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about, I have learned from the book Lost Connections. I find that that is probably one of the best books that you can read on depression, because it's not like a self-development, get inspired, wake up early, do your morning routine kind of approach. It's more so kind of like asking yourself very simple questions that have to do with very important elements of your life that do affect the way that you feel. For example, when I feel like I'm getting uninspired, or I feel like the things that usually bring me joy don't bring me joy, I ask myself, maybe it has to do with my work. Is there something that I'm creating that doesn't align with my values? Why am I creating what I'm creating? And maybe it's not your work. Maybe you feel perfectly aligned with everything that you're doing, and maybe you don't. And maybe that's something that you might have to look into, because it is affecting your mental health. And if it's not that, then you can look at your relationships. I know for myself, I am introverted. I can spend a lot of time on my own, but sometimes to my own detriment. And it kind of can happen very gradually, so I don't even notice that I've spent 6 days on my own. But having that thought exchange and dialogue with someone else, someone outside of your head, can be very beneficial. And I know that in the thick of it, it will seem almost near impossible to make a plan with someone. So I hope that you have friends that know when to push you and when to take you out of your room. That is something that I've learned as well, that I need friends that can kind of like kick me in the butt sometimes, so that I can wake up and get out, and know that ultimately when I'm outside of my room, having a conversation with my friend that doesn't revolve around my misery, that makes me feel better. Maybe the sort of movement and exercise that I'm doing is lacking some sort of connection, so maybe I need to pick up more yoga or run outside in nature, just be outside. Social media is a huge one. Especially right now. I think it's really hard not to be constantly on your phone with everything that is going on in the world. You're looking to keep yourself informed, you're looking to be able to be some sort of help, but I know that taking care of yourself means that you can take care of the people around you and your community much better. So try and give yourself a few days in which you just log off of social media. When I do that and I start picking up more fiction, I feel so much better. And of course, I like to look at what I eat. What you eat is very important. What you eat feeds your microbiome, your gut bacteria, and your gut bacteria is responsible for creating 80 to 90% of your serotonin and your dopamine, which are like your happy hormones. So a lot of people like myself who have dealt with IBS or Crohn's disease or anything to do with kind of like a digestive issue usually suffer from depression, because it means that their microbiome is compromised and they're not producing as much dopamine and serotonin. So making sure to keep that gut happy, having a wide array of different plant fiber, of different plants, eating just good healthy food is always a great idea. It's always a great idea to support your health. Of course, you might be doing all these things and you're still feeling depressed, and that happens. And in those instances, I would say reach out, go to therapy, call a friend, discuss your options. And I hope that maybe in your good days, you can kind of have a very serious conversation with someone that you feel comfortable with and talk openly about your depression, your anxiety, whatever mental health illness you're dealing with, so that they know that the next time you're going through something, they might be able to help you in ways that you can't help yourself. So at least for me, it was kind of like setting a routine up for myself in the days that I feel good, of things that I know make me feel good, make me feel alive, so that then I do those consistently, so that when I do feel like a bout of depression is coming along, they don't seem so foreign, so I can grasp at them a little bit easier. Anyway, I hope that you're well. This is a weird time, which it's always a weird time when you have depression, but I send you all my love, and I wanted to make this video kind of just to remind you that there's people everywhere that might seem like they have their shit together, but ultimately they might not. So never compare yourself to anyone on social media. Remind yourself that you are not the only one going through this, and this doesn't mean that your feelings are invalid or that you should tone down your sadness or depression. It just means that there are other people feeling the same as you, and you should be able to reach out and not feel like an alien. I wish you all very well. I send you a big hug, and we'll talk soon. Bye.